My wife told me her dad for years was her secret lover. I only found out the truth when he told her to just tell me. And I had just paid for the dinner of the man who'd been sleeping with my wife while she pretended. When my wife reconnected with her father, I was genuinely happy for her. I grew up in a stable home with both parents, so I couldn't imagine what it must have felt like for her to finally fill in the blank of someone who'd been missing her whole life. She was so excited, glowing even, when she told me he'd reached out. They started emailing, catching up on birthdays and old photos, things she'd only ever dreamed of asking him. I thought it was beautiful. I thought this was the beginning of something healing for her. I couldn't have been more wrong. After college, we got married. It was perfect. We danced until our legs hurt, and she looked at me like I was the only man on earth. Her father wasn't there. She hadn't told her mom about him yet, said she wanted to protect her feelings. I didn't agree with the secrecy, but I told myself it wasn't my place. If that's how she needed to handle her family, I'd respect it. That's what marriage is, right? Trust. For the past couple of years, they'd stayed in touch occasionally. I'd see her typing away on her laptop, smiling sometimes, sighing others. When I asked who she was talking to, she'd say, "Dad," casually, like it was just a normal father-daughter thing. I never questioned it. I trusted her. Then about a month ago, I noticed she'd been distant. Not cold exactly, but quieter, more distracted. She'd step out to take calls, late-night ones, and when I'd ask who it was, she'd say, "Just family stuff." Her tone was flat, no explanation, no warmth. I didn't want to pry. I've always been the kind of husband who gives space. But that space became a canyon between us. Last week, she left her laptop open on the kitchen table. Normally, I wouldn't snoop. I respect her privacy, but a notification popped up. It was an email from someone named D. I knew that was her dad's first initial. The subject line just said, "Last night." My stomach dropped. My instinct screamed at me to close it, but my hand didn't listen. The email was long. Too long. It wasn't just casual updates or fatherly advice. It was intimate. The kind of language that makes your skin crawl because you know it doesn't belong in a family exchange. He was talking about her body, about how much he missed her, how he couldn't stop thinking about what they'd done the last time they visited. My brain shut down. I couldn't process the words I was reading. I kept telling myself there had to be another explanation. Maybe it was a mistake. Maybe I was misunderstanding something. But then I scrolled, and there she was, my wife, replying, talking about how she couldn't stop thinking about him either. About how what they were doing was wrong, but felt right. About how she wished she could see him again soon. When she told me her dad was coming to visit, she was glowing. I hadn't seen her that excited in months. She talked about how much she missed him, how great it would be to finally spend time together in person after all those years apart. I was happy for her genuinely. Her father was this ghost of a man who'd suddenly reappeared, and she seemed lighter because of it. She even asked if I'd be okay with him possibly staying with us for a bit while he looked for a place. I told her I was fine with it. We agreed to take him out to dinner the night he arrived. It felt like a big moment. The first time I'd meet the man who'd shaped so much of her pain, and now her healing. I picked a nice little Italian place downtown. The kind with soft lighting and quiet corners, a place meant for good conversation and connection. I wanted it to be special for her. The second we pulled into the parking lot, something felt off. She was jittery, almost like she was nervous. Not excited nervous. Anxious. When she saw him step out of his car, she froze for half a second, then bolted toward him. What happened next? I still can't get it out of my head. She jumped into his arms, literally jumped, and wrapped her legs around his waist like a kid greeting a parent after years away. Except this wasn't a quick hug. He held her there. He held her tight. And then, without putting her down, he carried her inside the restaurant like that. I just stood there, stunned. People were staring. I felt my face burning. Not from embarrassment, but from confusion. I wanted to tell myself it was just an emotional reunion, that I was overthinking it. But the way his hands were on her, too familiar, too low, it made my stomach twist. When we got inside, I thought things would settle, but they didn't. She never introduced me. Not once. I had to awkwardly stick out my hand and introduce myself, and even then, he barely acknowledged me. Didn't even look me in the eye. He just grinned at her like I wasn't there. They had their own rhythm, little inside jokes, quiet whispers, shared smiles. Every time I tried to join in, it was like I was invisible. Then came the wine. My wife never drinks much, one glass, maybe two at a wedding. But that night, she kept refilling her glass, laughing louder than usual, touching his arm every time she did. I tried to tell myself I was imagining it, that the distance I felt was just me being uncomfortable. But I couldn't shake it. Every time he leaned in close to her, every time she giggled and brushed her hair behind her ear, I felt something inside me start to crack. When the food came, I barely touched mine. They were too busy talking about the old days, about memories I knew she didn't even have. He was feeding her stories and she was eating them up, completely forgetting I was even there. Once, when I reached for her hand under the table, she pulled it away, almost instinctively. She didn't even look at me when she did it. The night ended without a single acknowledgement of me being her husband. No introduction. No mention. Nothing. On the drive home, she was quiet, staring out the window, smiling to herself. When I asked if she was okay, she said, "It just feels like everything's finally right again." I tried so damn hard not to overreact. I kept telling myself, this is her dad, her father, the man she barely got to know growing up. Of course, she'd be emotional. Of course it would look intense. Maybe I was just being jealous or insecure or overly protective. I wanted to believe that. I really did. But the longer I sat there at that dinner table, the harder it became to ignore what I was seeing. It didn't feel like a reunion between a father and daughter. It felt like I was sitting across from my wife while she was on a date with an older man. The way she looked at him, the way she giggled when he leaned in close, it wasn't the kind of affection you show a parent. They whispered to each other, their heads tilted together like they were sharing secrets. Every time their hands brushed, they didn't pull away. At one point, I swear they were holding hands under the table. I tried to focus on my food, on the sound of silverware scraping plates, anything to distract myself from the feeling crawling under my skin. I told myself to breathe, to keep it together, to wait until we got home to talk about it. But every time I looked up, they were locked in their own little world. I'd never felt more invisible in my life. When dinner finally ended, I was so relieved I could have cried. I thought maybe we could go home, have a private conversation, and sort things out, figure out what the hell was happening between them, or at least talk about how uncomfortable I felt. But before I could even open my mouth, she called out across the parking lot, "Just follow us." Follow us? That's when I noticed him walking toward his car, keys in hand, like he already knew where he was going. Our house. My heart sank. Apparently, without asking me, she had decided that her dad was going to stay with us. When I tried to tell her that we hadn't agreed on that, she snapped. Not just irritated, furious. She started yelling in the parking lot, saying we definitely talked about it and that I already agreed. I was so stunned I couldn't even respond at first. My wife never yells. Never. She's always been soft-spoken, even when she's upset. But this version of her was different. Almost offensive, like I'd just accused her of something. I tried to stay calm, reminded her that I said it would be hard to know how I felt before meeting him, that I wanted to see what he was like first. To that, she threw her arms up and said, "Well, now you've met him, so it's fine." That sentence hit me like a punch. The coldness, the way she dismissed me. It wasn't like her at all. The drive home was silent. Just the hum of the tires and my own thoughts echoing in my head. She was on her phone the whole time, probably texting him. I stared straight ahead, hands gripping the wheel until my knuckles went white. When we got back, it only got worse. She went straight to the kitchen and opened another bottle of wine. He joined her like it was the most natural thing in the world. I sat there in the living room, watching them drink, laugh, and lean close again. His hand brushed her lower back. Once, I caught him tuck a strand of her hair behind her ear. She didn't flinch. My stomach turned. The air in the house felt wrong. Heavy, suffocating. I couldn't stand it anymore. I went to the bedroom, grabbed a duffel bag, and started throwing clothes inside. I didn't even know where I was going. I just knew I couldn't stay there another second. When I walked back through the living room, bag slung over my shoulder, she stopped mid-laugh and looked at me like I was the crazy one. "Where are you going? Why are you leaving?" she asked, her voice dripping with confusion and something else, guilt maybe. I told her exactly how I felt, how the entire night had felt wrong, how they'd been inappropriate from the moment we sat down, and how for the first time since I'd known her, I didn't even recognize the person standing in front of me. My voice was trembling with anger and disbelief, but she just laughed it off, saying I was being ridiculous, that I was overreacting. When I pressed harder, her tone changed. She told me to loosen up, that I was making things weird for no reason. That phrase, loosen up, lit a fire in me. I'd spent all evening sitting through that humiliating dinner, pretending not to see the way she looked at him, and now she was telling me it was all in my head? I snapped. I told her I wasn't interested in being around her or her father, if that's how they were going to act. I didn't care what her excuses were, it was wrong. We started yelling. I don't even remember what words were said anymore. It was chaos. Both of us shouting over each other, the sound of glasses clinking, footsteps pacing. Then, in the middle of it all, Don, suddenly shouted, "Just tell him." Everything froze. She went dead silent. My heart stopped in my chest. I looked between them, waiting for someone to speak, but neither did at first. My stomach was in knots, my throat dry. "Tell me what?" I managed to ask. She just stared at me, tears welling in her eyes, shaking her head like she didn't want to say it. And then she did. She told me that Don wasn't her real father. For a second, I thought I misheard her. My brain couldn't even process the words. I just stood there, staring, waiting for her to say she was joking, but she didn't. Instead, she started talking faster, her voice breaking as she confessed. She said that while I was away at college, she met Don at a party. That they'd started seeing each other off and on. That's when my stomach dropped. I could barely hear anything else she was saying over the sound of my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. She was shaking, rambling, trying to explain that it wasn't serious, that it had just happened, that she didn't mean for it to go that far. But then she said something that made my blood run cold. She told me that during their affair, she developed a kink, some twisted roleplay thing, where Don would pretend to be her father when they slept together. I felt physically sick. I think I actually staggered back. She kept talking, saying that when Don moved away, they stayed in touch. That's when she started telling me about her dad, building this entire lie for years. Every email, every phone call, all of it was with him. Not her father. Her lover. She had been lying to me since college. I couldn't breathe. My hands were shaking, my mouth dry, my chest tight like someone was crushing it from the inside. Every memory I had of her talking about her dad replayed in my mind. All those moments I felt sorry for her. All those times I told her I understood how complicated it must be. All those nights I comforted her when she missed him. Every one of them was a lie. And then, like it was nothing, she said that she had hoped he could move in with us. Permanently. Suddenly, everything started to make sense. All the little details I'd brushed off over the years. The reason he wasn't at our wedding. The reason she'd never told her mother they'd reconnected. The reason I'd never spoken to or even seen a photo of this supposed father until now. It all fit together in one horrifying instant, and the weight of it crushed me. I realized that I had taken the man who'd been sleeping with my wife out to dinner. I shook his hand. I paid for their meal. I watched them laugh together, thinking I was witnessing a father and daughter bond, when really I was sitting across from an affair that had lasted years. I didn't say a word. I just walked out. My vision was blurry, my body trembling, and before I could even reach my car, I threw up in the yard. Then I got in and drove away. No destination, no plan, just the primal instinct to get out. That was a month ago. I've been living out of a hotel ever since, barely functioning, stuck somewhere between numbness and despair. I can't eat properly. I can't sleep for more than a few hours at a time. Every time I close my eyes, I see her face, or I hear her laugh echoing across that dinner table. I haven't told anyone, not my family, not my friends, not even my coworkers. I just told them I needed time off for personal reasons. The truth is too insane to explain. How do I even begin to tell people that my wife of 6 years lied about who her father was, that she built an entire identity around a relationship that was never real? She's called me dozens of times since. Left voicemails saying things like, "Please come home to us," and "We can fix this together." Us. Like she and that man are somehow a unit now, like I'm the one who needs to come crawling back. I've always tried to handle life rationally. I think things through. I solve problems. But this? There's no logic here. There's no manual for this kind of betrayal. Do I get divorced? Obviously, I have to. There's no coming back from this. But then what? How do I face my friends, my family, my coworkers? How do I explain that my wife pretended her lover was her father for years?